My name is Carla Walker. I'm the climate advisor for the city of Cincinnati. And my right hand is Liz Reichert. Say hi, Liz.
Hi, everyone.
Liz is the Environmental Defense Fund Fellow at the Office of Environment and Sustainability. We are very glad to welcome today's guests, Ryan Walling and Michael Smucker of Greenlots. They'll give you a little more insight into the work that they do shortly. As always, I just want to give a quick message to those who may be joining us for the first time. Our E-Vroom Zooms are monthly conversations to connect with the public on EV topics and speak to movers and shakers in the EV world, primarily in Cincinnati, but and across Southwest Ohio, but we're more than happy to expand that circle. Big thanks to those of you who are repeat room Zoomers. We're always very glad to see you. As the climate advisor, I have the opportunity to support the city's Office of Environment and Sustainability on a number of their climate change initiatives, including their electrification strategy, which EV Cincy is a part of. And EV Cincy is our public outreach and education initiative to help us build awareness around the benefits of electric vehicles and the EV activities that are happening in Cincinnati. And these events are part of how we've kind of reworked our public outreach and engagement under COVID-19. So a couple of things to note about our chats. Periodically, we have chats that have a polling question or two in them. We've got one polling question now. Liz, if you want to share that on the screen while I continue to kind of walk folks through things. These chats and E-Vroom Zooms are not webinars, and while there will be PowerPoint decks for some of them, like this one, we want to make sure that we're engaging with the audience. So we ask that if you can, make sure your camera is switched on. I want to also encourage you to drop any questions or comments that you have in the chat box during the guest presentation. Following the presentation, Liz and I will start off the conversation with a few interview questions for Ryan and Michael, and then we'll kind of open it up to the Q&A. And what I'll do is I'll call on a few of you to ask your questions yourselves. While we are pushing really hard for this to be kind of like an engaging, lively event, we also really want you to make sure that you can hear. So once we welcome our guests and they get started, please be kind and mute your microphones. So let's dive in. Join me in a warm EV Cincy welcome for Ryan Walling and Michael Smucker, the Greenlots team. Michael and Ryan, I'll let you take it away.
Well, thank you so much to both Carla and Liz. Ryan and I are really happy to be a part of this program. My name is Michael Smucker. I'm the regional sales manager for the Midwest for Greenlots, and Ryan works as the solutions engineer for our team here in this region. We're charged with building charging infrastructure for, utilities and communities and large, enterprise type customers. And we're here today to talk about just kind of a general overview of charging and charging infrastructure and the kind of work that we do. Can everyone see the screen that I've shared?
Yes, we can.
Yep. Okay, cool. Ryan, before I jump into it, anything you want to add?
No, just really excited. Thank you all for taking some time in your afternoon. Michael and I both are Ohio, born and raised, and like that it's really relevant here in the Midwest and Ohio for all of us and for you all down in Cincinnati. So really looking forward to the discussion, and thank you all for joining.
Yeah, and as Carla mentioned, we really encourage questions. So, you know, I think it's, as Carla May mentioned, either she'll call on you to ask questions directly, or I assume there's a chat box that you could also drop questions in as well. If there's any questions, Liz, that you see pop up in the middle of the presentation that are relevant, please have us, you know, feel free to stop us, and you know, we'll answer any and all questions. Because we're talking to the Cincinnati crowd too, before I jump into the slides, I just wanted to just talk very briefly that some of you that may drive EVs may have had some experiences over the last couple of years with some charging units that were on the Greenlots system that may have had some performance issues. And so I just wanted to touch upon that issue and let this group know that Greenlots is well aware of those, and that we actually were providing the network capabilities on those machines for free for the entirety time that they were running. And so that there are issues with that with some of those existing units. So if anyone has particular questions about that, feel free to ask them on this chat. All right, well, we'll start to get into the presentation here. Let me see if I can get this to advance. All right, so I mean, you know, what we're here doing, you know, both Ryan and I, and probably many people on this call, you know, why we're involved in this, and why, quite honestly, Greenlots is involved in this, and then even to a further extent, why Shell, who owns Greenlots, is involved in this, is really for the needs of a cleaner world. You know, I think most are aware that, you know, we have an issue with carbon, and it has an effect on our world, and that we have to find a way to not only clean up our transportation system, but our energy system. So, you know, we are really transitioning into a much cleaner transportation system, and there are probably those on the call that know the statistics better than I, but in terms of the role that transportation plays, it's really the biggest piece of you know, the contributor of carbon, you know, into our environment. And so cleaning up the transportation sector goes a long way to making massive improvements in our climate change situation. So specific to trends within the EV world, we see that EV sales are currently around 7 million worldwide, and by 2040, they're expected to be 500 million. So we're looking at, you know, some massive shifts in the types of vehicles that are on the road, specifically with EVs on the road. And then obviously the electric vehicles and charging infrastructure kind of go hand in hand. The more electric vehicles on the road, the more charging infrastructure, and the more charging infrastructure, the more electric vehicles there are on the road. So we see trends in the industry in EV charging expanding. Of course, we see major trends. If you're paying attention to the electric car news, you see major trends in the automakers making huge commitments to building EVs and transitioning their business models to electric. And then, of course, we also see trends in the industry about one of the most expensive components of electric vehicles, which is batteries, and where we see significant trends in the industry of the cost of batteries declining. So this is a beautiful thing. I mean, again, we're at the beginning of a very of a hockey stick climb in EV sales, and so the latest statistics are 57% of new car sales will be electric vehicles by 2040, which is really fantastic. And as I mentioned, the automakers making big investments. These are dollars that are already being spent. And Greenlots in some capacity works with virtually every OEM out there of all classes of vehicles. So we do see you know, this movement being made, and we see the activity around this with all the automakers. So a little more about Greenlots. I kind of mentioned Greenlots was a startup. We're, I think, in our 12th year, and then in early 2019 we were acquired by Shell. Many thought, I heard the statement said to me, "Oh, did they buy you to shut you down?" And the reality is that it's the exact opposite of that. Shell is really progressive from an oil and gas standpoint, in the sense that they are already committed to being out of the oil and gas business by 2050. And in order to do so, we are a part of their new energies division, which takes a very serious, you know, approach and investment in renewable energies and electric vehicles and charging infrastructure, and basically reducing, you know, the carbon footprint. So our company is headquartered out of LA, and we're growing rapidly. I think when I came on board a year and a half ago, I was maybe employee number 70, and I think we're over 200, maybe close to 250 employees now, and growing weekly. And we do have a global footprint. The Greenlots footprint is global. We have business in India, Singapore, and Southeast Asia, as well as North America. Our mission is to sustainably shape the electric mobility future by delivering innovative EV charging solutions that connect communities in a safer, cleaner, and smarter way. We have a vision that, you know, EV charging is reliable, affordable, and accessible to everyone. And as a part of the work that we do, this slide just kind of breaks down all the different segments of our business. So, you know, from the far left, you know, advisory services and site identification, system design and installation. We are a source for hardware procurement. We are a software provider, so software that works on, you know, the function, you know, helps the charging station to function and facilitates the transaction for a driver, but it also records a significant amount of data that is used for future, you know, deployments. We do operation and maintenance, customer support, and energy services. Our software platform was built in a very robust sort of way, and it was essentially built for utilities. So energy management is a big part of what our solution is. I'm going to turn the slides over to Ryan. I don't know, Ryan, if you need me to advance them.
Yeah, I'll have you keep driving for a minute here.
Yeah, so I'm going to turn it over to Ryan, and he's going to cover the next several slides.
Yeah, thank you, Michael, and again, great background. Do we have any questions or anything before I kind of get into EV charging and what it looks like, what it is today, and any questions so far?
Let's go ahead and we can hold all the cues until the end.
Okay, great. Yeah, so really one of the kind of the basic pieces I want to cover is maybe not all charging is the same. You know, a lot of the work that I do in helping to, you know, Michael and I do in developing what EV charging looks like is understanding the right application, the right time, the right charger to fit those needs. So are we putting a charger at a golf course where we would expect someone to be parked there for 2 or 4 hours, maybe longer if you want to play 36? Or are we putting a charger that's right off of 71, you know, coming right out of Cincinnati. And so a lot of again, what we do is understanding that need and that application. So what this slide really shows you is kind of the basics, that we can start with what we would call a level 2 charger, which is that's the same as like a dryer plug that's in your basement or out in your garage. Okay. That's something you would use to maybe park at a workplace all day, park at a golf course, a park, something where you're not really trying to get your car filled up as quickly as you possibly could, but you're going to have some idle time that you're going to sit there and probably leave the vehicle for a while. So that's going to charge a vehicle at a range of 25 to 70 miles of range per hour. Okay. The next thing, and I think if I could say so, the sexier part of charging is the higher powered, the bigger capacity. How are you going to get your vehicle filled up as quickly as you can? And I'm going to hate myself for saying this, but it gives you the gas station model. You plug in your gas, you fill your gas tank, it fills up, you can go in and get a candy bar and come back out and you keep going. So while we're getting closer to there, what we're describing in that feeling is what we call level 3 charging, or DC fast high powered charging. And it has a pretty wide range of what that's going to do, but those are generally places where you may park your car for a while, but more than likely you're parking it for, 15 minutes, 20 minutes, maybe 30 minutes of time, depending on what you're doing. So going to put these kind of level 3 chargers on highways, on corridors, on routes where people could plug in, go to the restroom, come back out, and they're going to have gotten, 100 miles of range, in that 30-minute time period. Okay. So those are really the two, at a high level, the two basic, feeling and uses of EV charging is level 2 and and DC fast or high power charging. Okay. You can see here the connectors. I don't know how many EV drivers we have right now. That J1772 is really standard across most electric vehicles, minus a Tesla is really the outlier, in which a Tesla would use an adapter. But that 1772 is going to fit most electric cars today. When you actually start to get into that DC fast, high power charging, the vehicles today have split, as some of them are using what you see on the left there that's called CHAdeMO, and on the right is what we would call CCS. And luckily you all are tuning in today. We actually, the big driver and the big user of CHAdeMO has been Nissan and the Nissan Leaf vehicles. But it was actually an amazing revelation. I think it was yesterday, they released their new electric SUV that has switched over to now CCS. So this, I don't know what the future holds for CHAdeMO and what all of that means, but I think we're probably going to see more of a standardization towards that right looking plug, what we call CCS. And probably going to see that's going to be the more standard feature across all cars, maybe minus Tesla, looking forward. Michael, you want to go to the next slide? And I like this graphic here because, chargers can come in a lot of different shapes and sizes, and what do they look like? What are they intended to do? What are they going to be used for? Changes how we select hardware, how hardware is the thought process that goes into installing hardware like this. So you can see the level 2, they're much smaller stations. They're pretty compact. Again, something that you would plug in almost to a dryer outlet and, would give you everything that you would need there. Some have screens, some don't have screens, cable management, this or that. But that's what you're really going to see for most of the level 2 type applications. Then when you look below it, you really see the stations start to get bigger. And that's the higher energy, the more capacity, the faster charge. Those are just bigger stations that have a little bit bigger footprint. And then the high powered, you can kind of see it, those start to break up, and we could get into some technical details if anyone has the questions, but those break up into dispensers and power engines, and that's what gets the capacity and increases the total output and things like that. So I like to just use this slide to just EV drivers, experienced or novice, I think it's a good visualization of kind of the different things you could expect to pull up to. You want to go to the next one, Michael?
Yeah, and I would like to add, you know, one of the things about the way that Greenlots is set up and goes to market is that we are what we call agnostic on this hardware discussion. We do not manufacture hardware. We work with a variety of hardware manufacturers, as you can see from this page, and we do the most stringent testing in electric vehicle chargers, and we're then only bringing out to market those that pass all of our protocols, and it's one of the foundational pieces of how Greenlots is really building the most flexible, scalable infrastructure models in the market, because we're not tied to one specific charger. We're really trying, as Ryan mentioned, to site the right charger for the right use case in the right location. And for a city or a utility or a big, you know, retailer, that can vary from site to site. And so it's really incumbent upon us to really understand what someone's needs are and what the site needs are to make sure that we put the right hardware there, but then we run it all under the same network.
Yeah, well said, Michael. And a great segue into our next point here. This would be a great question here. I didn't think of this, Carla, before now for a polling, but what we would say in the EV business, or the software EV business, is the OCPP protocol. And as Michael mentioned, we don't manufacture hardware. Okay, what we do is we take our software and we make sure it integrates properly to different various hardware manufacturers. And those hardware manufacturers build to interpret and speak the language of OCPP so that we can then take our software, integrate it with the hardware, and then we have a fully functioning, what we would call smart charger. A charger being that it has both the hardware and the software component combined into one. And so I bring this up because, as Michael alluded to in the last slide, is where we are in the infancy of the EV industry, there's so much growth that's going to be had in terms of features, in terms of winners, in terms of losers, that anybody that, with the customers that we work with and our opinion on developing the market, is you want to develop solutions that give you the greatest level of flexibility today and in the future. And that's done through the OCPP, or what we call the Open Charge Point Protocol. And so there's different, you know, iterations of this software, you know, confirmation, if you will, that starts to talk about vehicle to grid and, you know, what are the things that are required from the charger side, from the hardware side, that allow vehicle to grid to operate correctly. Things of that nature, error codes. Think of it as a protocol, but think of it as like an EV charging language that really our software uses to integrate. So when 2022 comes out, and then there's this phenomenal new charger that has battery backup and has vehicle to grid capabilities, and it can charge up to 500 kilowatts per minute, and all of these great phenomenal features, all that we will need to do is just integrate that into our software, and then it's another solution, you know, that anyone who's on a Greenlots software network would then be able to have access to or add as a part of their offering. And so that's all centered around OCPP. Michael, anything to add there, or anything that was maybe unclear?
No, I think that was great. I mean, if you just think about it this way, you know, we talked about the hardware, lots of different selection, you know, that piece of flexibility, and then same from the software. Again, not selling Greenlots on this call, but really helping everyone on the call understand that when we're talking about flexible, scalable that Ryan's alluding to, we're actually giving people the ability to kick us out of their charging network. So if you think about it in reverse, right? If you're setting up something that's going to be more and more chargers at your workplace, in your community, in your retail operation, or within a utility, you want this flexibility, and you do not want proprietary equipment and proprietary software where you're locked in. You're looking for the flexibility to say that I have a good starting point and I have something to build on.
Yep.
All right,
Absolutely.
Ryan, next slide. There you go.
Yeah, so the last piece, we've kind of talked now chargers, the hardware, and again, at our core, what Greenlots really is, and a lot of our expertise is developing the industry, but our backbone is software. And we have, as this industry is developed, there's something that used to be called non-network chargers, or as I like to say, dumb chargers, that really don't connect to the internet. There's no way to understand, is this working? How many people have charged at this station for the last day, for the last week, for the last year? None of that data was available. And just as EVs had been developing, there were a lot of non-networked chargers that have been installed just because they're at the time pretty cost effective. Well, now it's still pretty cost effective to just use network charging. And in the 2020 era that we live in today, we're driven by data. So, utilities, retail establishments, workplaces want to understand how many people are using these chargers. How long do they stand for? How much energy was used? What was the transaction? How do we charge someone to use this? All of that is done through the software or through the networked capabilities of these chargers. And so what Greenlots platform is called is Sky, but across any network provider, they're going to have something like this that provides real-time status of the chargers, so that the minute a station goes down, or if there's an issue with it, you would be notified, we would be notified, whomever. Like I said, you can track daily usage. You can track this down to a 15-minute interval of how much energy was used through sessions. And so this just gives a lot more power in understanding how EV drivers use the charging stations, engage with the charging stations, and as I'm seeing this continue to build, at the end, the possibilities are almost endless when we really just can capture that data the right way and understand it and present it in a good, easy way. Carl, I saw we have a question. Did we want to wait on questions, or did we want to?
Go ahead and answer that. I think that's a great question from Jeff.
Yeah, Jeff, thanks a lot for chiming in here. So the question is, does this reporting software state whether or not a charging station actually works? And the answer to that is absolutely. So it's real-time notifications of the current health or the status of that charging station. So with network charging stations, the minute something would come down, we would be notified, or the site host, the owner of the charger, would be notified to look into that further. The other piece I want to capture here before we move on is the things that'll be added all are going to be centered around some type of platform. And I say again, we're in this 2020 world. I get asked all the time about battery backup and vehicle to grid. Those are two things that get brought up a lot, and fleet applications and monitoring and tracking all of that. Smart networked charging is the trunk of all of those branches. So as we integrate with batteries and load management and site management, so you're not charging at the most energy at the most expensive time of the day. All of those build off of having a platform to understand and to track that data. So there's a lot of just incredibly innovative technologies and things that are happening, and all of that is really centered around, you know, this platform or smart charging platforms like this. Michael, if you don't have anything to add, we can go on to the next slide here. And one of the last pieces, this may be old news to a lot of you EV drivers, but one of the things as I got into this industry that I thought was one of the coolest things is, again, we're progressing our society forward, I would say, of we are ditching, for the most part, credit cards. We have Apple and Android Pay. I can walk up to a convenience store and I can scan my watch and I can pay for the cola that I just bought. And, you know, EV charging is very much following that same pattern that, you know, Greenlots, there's PlugShare, there's a lot of these EV charging apps that's actually more often than not how an EV driver is actually going to engage with a station. That they're going to download the Greenlots app, and when they go up to a charging station, they're going to scan a barcode or enter in a code that's on the station, and that's going to pull up the station onto your phone. So if there's a fee that would be associated with it, you know, your credit card would be on there. You could just start the charge and pay for it. If it was just a free session, you could just initiate the session from there. But it's also a way for you to find stations. You know, it's a great opportunity that if you're driving around and you don't know where to charge, or you're planning out a road trip, you could look onto your app, see where your charging locations would be, and be able to think about maybe what your day would look like if you needed to find a place to charge. So I'd say it's very much a part of the future. That's with network charging, integrating it with the app and how the app works is very much a part of that total experience. The other piece I will add to the app portion is we obviously there's multiple charging providers like Greenlots that are out in the market. And we all have our own separate apps with our own chargers and this and that. One of the things many of these companies have come together and agreed on is we are actually going to integrate our apps and our chargers with one another with what we call roaming. So if you're on the Greenlots app, you can still charge from charging company B. Or if you're on charging company B app, you could and you pull up to a Greenlots app or a Greenlots charger, you don't have to download another app, enter your credit card information again, do all of that you could really center this around a single application. And I think the best analogy I like to use with that is kind of a high tide raises all ships. We all compete and we all want to develop the market, and Michael and I would like to have every charger in all of North America. But the reality is there's a lot of people doing a lot of really good work to help enable e-mobility. And if we work together, it's going to lead to better adoption, it's going to lead to better cohesion, and it's going to be a better experience for EV drivers, EV enthusiasts, and people who really just want to see this industry realize its potential. So while there is a Greenlots app, I use it and I enjoy it. I will say we are working well with the other companies in the market to make this a really good, fluid experience for everybody, and receptive from them as well. Absolutely. With that, Michael, I'll pass it back to you.
Yeah, no, thank you, Ryan. That's great. And so I'm looking. I want to be respectful of the time. I have a few more slides that I'm going to show some examples of some of the work that we do at Greenlots. And again, we included this in here just more importantly to just kind of maybe, you know, spur ideas within the group of the people that are here on this call. So one of the entities that we've worked very closely with over the years is the City of Los Angeles, and this gives, you know, kind of an overview slide where you see the project overview in terms of like what the city is trying to do in terms of their GHG pollution and improving their air quality. You see over the time that we've been helping them with EV charging infrastructure, and they're just deploying electric vehicles. You can see all the impacts where, you know, you have the CO2 that's been avoided and the kWh of the energy used, the gallons of gasoline that have been saved and so forth. And then the far right shows you, the various aspects when we talk, back to when we were talking about flexible, scalable, as a city has to think about it relative to the police department, the water department, the street bureau, the parks and rec, the fire department, the transportation, the libraries, this one, the Department of General Services. So you can start to see a good illustration about how kind of comprehensive this infrastructure can be, and also the usefulness of being able to have all of these various charging needs met of all these different departments, but then running it all under one software system. The next, again, Greenlots is involved in basically every aspect of e-mobility, whether it's, like I said, utilities, communities, corporations, and another big area for us is automakers. So some of you may be aware of the work that we've done so far with Ford, but this slide is really showing that Ford took a kind of a technology approach to charging as they're planning the launch of their Mach-E. And so what we did with the flexibility of the Greenlots software, we connected into their the Ford Pass app. And what we did is enable a charging function within the Ford Pass app. So Ryan was talking about the roaming agreements with other charging companies, where you could use a Greenlots app on a ChargePoint station or a ChargePoint app on a Greenlots station. But what this is this allows Ford to go, a Ford driver to go through their Ford app and find the charging stations for Greenlots and all the other entities that we have roaming agreements for. So a huge amount of chargers in basically a few keystrokes that you can then, through that Ford app, you can find the charging station and you can initiate the charge. And so that technology, was a real step forward for someone like Ford, who's, as I said, coming out with the Mach-E, and then they have several other EVs coming after that. So that was a cool one. Some of you may be aware of that one of the most progressive taxi businesses in the country relative to e-mobility is right here in Ohio, in Columbus, Columbus Yellow Cab. And so we have helped Columbus Yellow Cab stand up their charging at their headquarters, and they've deployed so far 20 Teslas as a part of their taxi fleet. And then we're also now in the process of setting up charging hubs around the city of Columbus, so that the taxis, the electric vehicle, taxis, when they're out running their duties, they have other places to charge. And then this is another great slide that shows the work that we're doing with Volvo. This is the Volvo Lights program. That's the pilot program in Long Beach. And without getting into all the specifics of the program, what it basically is doing is it illustrates the various kind of chargers that are needed in a charging infrastructure setup, so that particular vehicles can run the duty cycles that's expected of them, right? So in this particular instance, it required the setup of I think they're deploying, was it 15 Class 6 vehicles, and it required 3 high-powered chargers, 6 50 kW chargers, and 15 level 2 chargers, in the setup, so that the trucks can do, overnight charging, as well as charging while they're loading and unloading, and some other opportunity charging within their duty cycle. The discovery of the distribution system that we're not just waiting for a long-range battery, but we're really understanding the duty cycle of an electric freight vehicle, and understanding the charging infrastructure to support that electrification is really the key to unlocking our electric distribution system, and all of that is within our current within the current technology and within the current battery ranges.
Yeah, Michael, just to add on that, this was an eye-opening piece for me. Was we think of electric trucks, we all think big rigs, 18-wheelers. And that day is coming, and that there are those trucks that are coming and being developed and will be competitive. But some of the greatest opportunity that is available today, like Michael said, within the technology is, that class 5, the taking it from distribution centers all throughout counties, not across states, but, when you actually get out of the macro and into the micro level distribution, there are tons and tons and tons of vans and trucks that are ICE vehicles currently that run the right duty cycles to move electric today, and it's a great point that we're at here in the industry and in the evolution.
Yeah, and it's that understanding that, quite honestly, as big as the projections are for passenger vehicles, and we talked about that early in the presentation. The fleet, the freight aspect of electrification has an opportunity to leapfrog even those numbers because of this understanding of duty cycles. Another one that's of note that we've been heavily involved with at the beginning, some of you may know about Electrify America and the work that they've been doing in building a nationwide charging infrastructure. You may not be aware that it's the Greenlots software and both our software and our app that are the back end that run this entire network. And you also may be caught in the news, I don't know if it was last week or the week before, that Electrify America has just completed 2 east to west routes across the United States, one on the southern part of the United States and one across the middle, which is really exciting. And then the last thing, Ryan mentioned storage, and people do like to think about storage. I think it's coming actually pretty fast. And so this slide is really just to illustrate that renewable energy and storage solutions are very easily integrated into charging infrastructure. With that, I think we'll turn it back over to Carla, and we'll see what what questions everybody has.
Guys, thank you guys for that. Really appreciate it. I'm going to dive in with a couple of questions from both myself and Liz. I usually ask folks, the first question I usually ask is like, how did you guys get into electric vehicles? But since we're running a little short on time, I want to dive into some of these meatier questions. And the first one that I have is, you talked about the Greenlots vision, and I wonder if you have some thoughts on this. Earlier this year, WRI, which is World Resource Institute, had an article about the California pro-equity EV policies, and they basically were looking at those as models for other state or governments to use if electrification is implemented with local equity considerations in mind. Residents who are most vulnerable to the negative impacts of vehicle emissions can benefit the most. And so I'm curious, in terms of the Greenlots vision and some of the work that you're doing, what are your thoughts on municipalities like Cincinnati, and how should municipalities like Cincinnati deliver EV benefits to the most vulnerable communities?
Carla, that's a fantastic question. I will be honest with you. I have been around this issue in some of the conferences I've been to and people that I've networked with and believe wholeheartedly. Also in some of the utility programs that we've been involved in, there are some higher incentives available for lower income areas that I think definitely come into play and we've done. But from a vision of the future, I'll be honest with you, my head has been down in just trying to build as much infrastructure as big and as fast as we can in the region that I personally have not dealt with that. We do have those on our policy team that would be way more dialed in than I am on it. So I don't want to give basically a made up answer on that, although I know it's a really important issue.
Okay. Liz, you got a question you want to throw out there?
I would, but I actually see Jeff has a question in the chat that looks really interesting.
Hey, Jeff, can you unmute and ask your question? And Michael, if I could have you stop sharing your screen so all of us can be on the...
Yeah, it's actually two questions.
You got it.
One of the things is just in working with cities, I know there's EV charging stations in parking lots and parking garages, but do you know of any cities that are installing them at on-street parking spaces? And then my other question had to do with more not local travel, but regional travel. And that is, like I said in the chat box, it seems like there's the stations I've seen are located at gas stations, but people don't spend very much time at gas stations. To your point earlier, it takes anywhere from an hour and 90 minutes for a level 3 charger to charge a big battery up. So it seems to me some of the best locations for regional travelers is at restaurants where people are going to grab lunch for an hour and a half. So is Greenlots seeking relationships with restaurants, national chain restaurants for highways, and also back to the question about on-street parking spaces, are you installing them, the hardware at least, at on-street parking spaces in cities?
Yeah, so there are, thanks for the question, Jeff. There are instances where there are, that we've been involved specifically with charging stations being installed for on-street parking. There's really so many details that can go into a site. It's probably not enough for us to cover it here. But the short answer is yes. I do know of communities that are also looking at utilizing utility poles and looking at chargers that are mounted on utility poles that can help, feed that on-street parking. And then your other point is a really good one. Again, we are working with a whole variety of customers in all different kinds of retail spaces, whether it, like you mentioned, restaurants, grocery stores, convenience stores. I think when you're talking about DC fast charging, you're going to be somewhere, the dwell time is going to be somewhere between, let's say, a half an hour to 45 minutes in most instances. And so, yes, you could get a bite to eat, at a restaurant. There are some convenience stores that are starting to address the issue from a standpoint that they're creating places within their convenience store where you have Wi-Fi and you can get a bite to eat there and you can send an email in addition to buying some things. But I think the real understanding is that there's going to be, as we build out infrastructure, there's going to be all different kinds of scenarios, and there's going to be all different kinds of places where we're going to find them in basically all the places, the public retail places, and in the city infrastructure, in public spaces, and then there's a whole bunch of considerations for dwell time that again are probably more than we can go into on this call, but I think you've captured the basic gist of it.
Great. Hey, it looks like Denise is in here. Denise is one of our ambassadors. Denise, you have a really interesting question. Why don't you go ahead and ask that?
Okay. When you plug your EV in, how is Shell planning to get rid of gas by 2050? So it's very important when you plug in your EV where the electricity is coming from for our planet.
Yeah, so renewable energy is a huge part of the platform for Shell's new energy approach, and I think in general there's a shift that's underway to renewable energy, and there's many others besides Shell and Greenlots that are pushing for 100% renewable energy in our infrastructure. So it's kind of like you want both to advance both. You want more charging infrastructure, more electric vehicles, and more renewable energy, and all of those things can happen at one time.
Thank you.
Cool.
Great. I'm looking at a question from Gary in the chat. Gary, if you want to unmute yourself and read your question out loud, I think it's a really interesting one.
Hey, Gary.
Hello. So my question is, you mentioned roaming, where an EV driver wouldn't need to have a half a dozen apps on their phone to be able to use a charger. But an even better charging experience is where I can just pull up to a charger, and when I plug in, my car identifies itself to the network. And as long as I have an account set up linked to that car, it just goes ahead and charges me appropriately, and I don't have to do anything other than just plug in. So I've heard this capability is coming. I've heard it's been coming for at least a year, and I'm just wondering what your perspective is on how far off it is still to go. Is that a year? Is it 2 years? Any perspective would be interesting to hear.
Yeah, Gary, that's a great question. I'll happily field it. Are you an EV driver yourself?
I am. Yes.
I had a suspicion there.
I will even say that I have both plugged in to a variety of networks with my Chevy Bolt, and I also have a Tesla in the family, and the Tesla experience is just what I described, where you just plug in and you're done. You don't have to mess with anything else.
Well,
So,
Ryan, Gary's being very semi-non-transparent here. He's also the president of the EV Car Club here in Cincinnati. You can say it.
Okay.
Yeah, say it. It's okay.
Well, great to meet you, Gary. Thanks for joining and asking the question. What I would tell you, and you may know this already, our control of that is entirely in the OEMs and the vehicles that are released. That's, that is what I would call telematics, and how a vehicle is going to plug in, what it's going to talk to, what it's going to understand, and seamlessly integrate it through that. Tesla, to your point, it's all in one system. They're a proprietary network. They're the hardware, they're the software. They don't play ball with anybody else. So you can get benefits like those telematics and the account where you just plug it in and it's already going to know. But a Bolt can't plug into that network, or the Tesla, vice versa. So the chargers that we're implementing, we're not trying to just implement it for Ford. That there's a partnership and a piece of that, but we're really working towards when are the majority of OEMs, or a large portion of them, going to have that functionality and features in those vehicles. And if I just gave you a true guess on what that is, I would say 5 years. I'm not a perfect expert, but I also live in the reality of where we are today. And I think we even have a map of the next cars that are being released. And that's not a piece of what I've seen today. So
to summarize in one sentence, it will require the EV manufacturers to support it. And so far, none of them have actually produced an EV that supports it. So we have to wait quite a while. Is that fair?
Exactly. Yep.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, and Gary, I'll just add that we'll probably see it sooner in the fleet sector of electrification, right? Because there's a little bit cleaner line, as Ryan's illustrating. And so, you know, so the fleet portion, to be able to have your work vehicles just plug in, and then it would not only charge the vehicle, but gather the relevant data that is necessary, you know, for the fleet to track that performance. Again, I don't know the exact time frame. There might be some on this call that might have even a better clue of the time frame, but we'll probably see it there first, and then it'll make its way out into the consumer market. And as an EV driver, Gary, I'm with you. I'd love to see it, you know, today, but it's certainly coming.
Okay, guys, thanks so much. We have one last question, and I love this question. It is from a very good friend of mine. Jason, are you still on? Jason Barron, are you still on? If you can unmute, I'd love for you to ask your question.
Hello.
Hey, how you doing?
Not too bad. I will put myself on TV too. So my question is, and it might be totally out of your wheelhouse, but I at least wanted to bring it up, and that is, does Greenlots have any connection to like a charging station that could be used for bikes and scooters, whether they are kind of shared scooters like you see with Bird and Lime in Cincinnati and in other cities around the country, or shared e-bikes like we have with Red Bike, but then also for people's personal e-bikes and e-scooters. I've talked to a couple of my colleagues around the country, and there are different cities that are developing kind of hubs that would allow folks to charge the vehicles at the hub. And I was just wondering if there's any news on that front.
So Michael, I'll take a first pass at this, and would love to hand it over, hear your insight as well. I'm smiling a little bit, Jason. It's a great question. Our early days, you know, like 2008, 2009, we were founded as an electric scooter company, you know, electric scooter charging company in the Philippines.
Okay.
Which I just, you know, closing the whole loop here, I think that's quite amazing. At this point, we have diverged from that, you know, much more into the software specific management business. And we don't have the solutions today. I apologize for me not being quite as knowledgeable. I know we have some all-stars here. I don't necessarily know how some of those electric scooters charge. I thought they were like through like those Android outlets and things that get plugged in. And so it's a little bit different of a type of hardware,
100%.
you know, that are plugging those in. But I use the electric scooters regularly, and I hear the need and see the need, and a part of that OCPP, I think there's a great opportunity to see that be a part of the solution. But with Greenlots offering on it today, I'm not as familiar, or don't think we have anything.
Yeah, I think that the notion of a charging hub that does all this variety, I think is probably within reach. As Ryan's saying, you know, we're focused on charging infrastructure, and you know, from level 2 on up. And so there's various you know, power levels that, you know, like for example, vehicles require, and I'm not as dialed into the scooters and the bikes exactly what they require, but that obviously would have to be taken into consideration. I'm assuming it's less. There may be some, I think there are some motorcycles that charge at a level 2, you know, speed. But I would think most of them are plug-in, right? Like just a 110 outlet. So certainly there's an integration opportunity, but to be specific on your question, no, we're not specifically developing that right at this time.
Awesome. Is that cool, Jace?
Yeah, like I said, I just, you know, in the broader conversation around electric vehicle charging, these are tiny vehicles, but still an important part of our network. So hopefully it can be part of Cincinnati's conversation moving forward.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, thanks, you guys. Look, we are just after our time, and I want to make sure we wrap up. This has been exciting and very good information, as our E-Vroom Zooms usually are. Before I close everything out, I'm going to turn the floor over to Liz for a quick announcement.
Absolutely. Thank you, Carla, and thank you for sticking with us until the end. I just wanted to thank all of our EV Cincy ambassadors who are wrapping up 10 weeks of working with us through kind of the escalating COVID situation. They've done a great job with our goal to educate 10,000 citizens from Cincinnati on the many, many benefits of EVs, which I'm sure everyone here is aware of. I did want to plug that we are recruiting for a new round of digital EV ambassadors who will be educating the city's citizens and getting us all the way to that 10,000 goal. So Carla, I believe, is putting the link to register to be a volunteer for us. Come work with us. It's very fun and a very cool community to be involved with. And second, I did want to mention we have a newsletter, the EV Cincy newsletter. It is where you can keep tabs on all of the great electric vehicle things and happenings in Cincinnati. So Carla is also putting the link to that in the chat box. Sign up. It is a great read.
Awesome. Okay, so Coolio, Michael, and Ryan, it has been a blast. Thanks for helping make sense of EV charging and EV charging technology. I know I've learned a ton of stuff, and I'm so glad that you guys were able to be with us today. Hey, thanks again for everyone who's been able to join in on the conversation. So big news, our next E-Vroom Zoom event in August is August 13th from 2 to 3 p.m. and it's going to be a big one. So we'll be joined by Trey Woosty, the VP of Beachmont Auto Group, but he's also bringing along his friend Martin Lee, who is the host of the international podcast EV News Daily. So if you have questions, that's the time. Like, you should really be at that Vroom Zoom. We'll send out the registration details and everything in the follow-up email, and I hope that we see you next. That's going to be it for today. Thank you guys so very much. Have a wonderful afternoon. Bye.
Thanks everybody. Bye.
Yep, thank you. Bye now.
See you, Phil.
There we go. There's the leave button. Okay.